Gather round, dads, it's time for a tale. Hand me a book and a warm pint of ale. Let's discuss writing and the literary gods with Dan Roberts on the Dad Lit Pod.
Welcome to the Dadlit Pod, the literary podcast for people who are always inevitably the ones who had to take out the garbage. Tonight, I'm joined by Lis Malone. Lis is a media and marketing professional from New York City with over 25 years in the industry. This includes consumer and multimedia audience research, event marketing, broadcast, print, and digital advertising, publicity, social media marketing, audio and video production, and both B2B and B2C strategic planning. And I'm sure she's going to tell us what that is. Her current focus is on the book publishing industry, where she works with talented, best-selling, and up-and-coming authors. She is a lover of stories, and she's launched her own small press to bring books she's passionate about to market. She currently resides in North Carolina with her ride or die pup. You can find her website at lismalone.com, LISMALONE.com. Welcome to the Dadlit Pod.
Oh, thanks for having me, Dan. I have to say right off the bat, I'm super impressed you got my name's pronunciation right the first time. Because that is always the first like Lise, or is it Liz, or is it Lisa? So that's like I'm
I
like wow, yay.
believe it or not, I was worried about the Malone part. I was like, oh no, now that I'm saying this, I probably should have asked her before this if it's Malone or Malone.
Maloney,
Maloney,
Melone.
it could always be something. You know what I mean? People always call me Bob Daniels at work. They'd like, "Oh, hey Bob Daniels," and I'm like, "No, I'm not. I'm not. This is the challenge of having two first names."
Well,
So anyway, now I'm intrigued because having read your bio, there seems to me to be a lot of areas in the economy where marketing is a little bit easier than books. So, let's get started with that. Why have you decided to get into the book marketing business?
So I sort of think of myself as the accidental book marketer. I never
Hmm.
set out to be in book marketing. I, like so many young people in New York, thought I was going to be an artist of my own. I started out as
Hmm.
a musician and I had these dreams of, oh, I'm going to be a professional musician. Well, I quickly and wisely discovered that I just wasn't good enough. I would end up being a music teacher. And not that there's anything wrong with being a music teacher, but I knew that my skill set was not working with students and children. So I then said, okay, I'm going to go into the music business. And I first started out doing music PR on my
Hmm.
own and loved that I was surrounded by artistic people. I was pitching artistic endeavors. I was just sort of taking all of my skill sets and making it um, something really useful in this industry that I loved. So then I started to think, okay, I'm going to work for a major record label. And then I started interning at some of the big labels. And then I realized, wow, they don't pay them any money.
No, they don't.
Yeah. And New York City is very expensive. And so then again, I said, okay, it's time for me to pivot once again. And then I discovered that, hey, I could work with music, but be in the radio business. So I kept like kind of taking these like little, like, little turns here and there and, but staying kind of in that area of being in a creative area. And so then I ended up in music. I'm sorry, my apologies. Then I ended up in radio. And
Mhm.
then found out, oh, wow, I'm only going to make money in this business if I'm in the sales and marketing side.
Yeah.
So I kept following the art, but then following the money. And
Don't we all?
yes. And then I discovered that the people who made the most money in radio were the salespeople.
Yep.
And so I got into the sales and marketing side, started working on campaigns, learning how to pitch, learning all about media, learning audience, learning programming, marketing strategies, promotions. And then I was like, I'm hooked. This is where I need to be. I need to be in the
Hmm.
marketing space. And so then from there, I just stayed in the media world, and I got to touch so many different areas of marketing, which I think has kind of helped me be a better marketer, because not only am I working on it now from pitching it, I worked on it on the other side. So I know exactly what their strategic goals are in terms of me pitching and what is going to be consumable for them in terms of monetization or having any kind of benefit from a content standpoint.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so I was in New York and having a great career, and I had some personal changes in my life, things happening with my family, things happening with myself, and I needed to make a big change. And I said, okay, I need to leave New York and just take a deep breath of life and start somewhere fresh. And then I came to Charlotte, North Carolina.
Hmm.
And on my trips back and forth, visiting family and coming through Charlotte, I was sort of like, okay, I'm in Charlotte. I'm going to do something in marketing, have no idea what I'm going to do yet. I'm going to figure it out. And then I had a chance meeting with Stephen Hartove,
Hmm.
who is a New York Times bestselling author who you'll be speaking with very soon.
Yes. Yes.
And he lives in the town that I grew up in, where I was visiting my dad on a trip back up to New York in the New York area, and we met at a CVS. And he was a writer, and we just kind of struck up this conversation. And he's like, "Oh, I'm a writer," and very wisely was pitching his book. Like every you meet somebody, you say, "Hey,
You
I'm a
have
writer."
to.
You
You
have
have
to.
to.
So
Yes.
he mentioned he was a writer. I said, "Oh, that's great." He's like, "Oh, yeah, I'm a marketer," and it kind of we had that moment of,
Hmm.
"Wow, what, should we try something here?" And we exchanged information. We got in touch. We said, let's figure something out. And wow, what is it, like 5 years, 6 years later? I'm not even sure.
Nice.
And yeah, I mean, he feels like family more than a client, but yeah, so we've been working together ever since. And that's how I sort of fell into the book business.
Interesting. I'm sure you know that book marketing is the bane of existence for most authors. Not just because it's hard. It's hard to get read, but it's also a thing where a lot of authors fear the sort of like the bots on Twitter and that sort of stuff. And so it when I found out that you were a book marketer for J. Scott Bell or J.S. Bell, who we had on the show, and you put me in contact with him and his new book, Welcome to Cottonmouth. Uh, I thought it would be fascinating to talk to an actual living book marketer who really exists and is not a bot on the internet. And
Someone,
yes. And so that's why I'm so excited to have you here because as you say, you've been doing this for 5 years. So you have some experience, and a lot of the Dad Lit Pod listeners are independent authors.
Mhm.
A lot of them are sort of dealing with this challenge of getting read and getting exposure. I don't know necessarily that they're trying to make a lot of money. They're mostly just looking to get exposure and get read. So, with that in mind, what is the key to getting read as an author? How does one go about doing that from your perspective as a person who's been now marketing books for 5 years?
So the first thing that I would recommend for an independent author
Yeah.
is to think about marketing not at the stage where they've now published the book, which is what most authors do. They
Hmm.
write this book, they publish it, they do their cover design, they've done all their editing, and now they've got this book on Amazon, and then they're like expecting to, okay, now there's something a lever I'm supposed to pull, and all of a sudden people are going to find me.
Yeah.
And so, and that's normal. So I don't want to sound like I'm discouraging people, but this is what I feel like a lot of authors tend to do. And instead, if I could hit the rewind button or change the way writers think as they're either working on their first book or even putting out their next book, is to think about what they're doing from a marketing standpoint pre-launch. And I'm
Mhm.
saying not even just pre-launch, I'm saying pre-production,
Yeah.
pre everything. You are still writing your manuscript. Um, so that way you can maybe avoid some of the pitfalls a little
Hmm.
earlier on than having that, if I can say it, oh shit moment too far down the line and you're already there's it's either going to be sink or swim. There really isn't anything we can do to change it unless you're going to just pull the book down and start from scratch, which
Yeah.
most writers would not do. And I get that.
Yeah.
So um, I think writers need to be really mindful, even from the point where they're writing their manuscript. Think of this as a product. And that's where I'm trying to talk about thinking like a marketer very early on. And when you're doing a product development, you don't create this product and then hope someone's going to buy it. You're fulfilling a need, you're fulfilling a niche, you're creating something that consumers will want or need. So when you're writing your book, you need to be able to very clearly define who you believe your reader would be, as opposed to, well, I wrote this book and I think this is who would like it. You know,
Mhm.
sometimes it helps if you're creating a product for your audience. Um, Even if you have this idea for a story and you're already past that point and you're not going to, as you're creating it, start to, think about as you're creating this, who you're writing this for. Um, and then once you've finished writing, I always suggest don't be your own editor. You
Hmm.
really need to have true independent voices who can read, beta read while you're still in that editing process and find those things that just, this character didn't make sense, this ending wasn't believable, whatever it may be. And I know that that's probably one of the hardest things for a writer to divorce themselves from their work long enough to, entrust it with someone else to give a really hard and honest opinion at times.
Yeah.
I'm going to give you an example if you don't mind.
Okay. Yeah. By all means.
I'm working I'm working on a project and I was going through the manuscript and I had to tell the writer, you got to change your ending. You would have thought I told them to cut their arm off, with a butter knife and
Yes.
then, stir fry it and serve it to their family. Um, and there was a lot of defending of it, da 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 da, blah, blah, blah. And I said, well, it doesn't fit the genre. I mean,
Yeah.
it's you're writing one type of genre and then it's ending like another one. And you're either going to disappoint the reader who liked the first part of your book and then they're going to hate the
Hmm.
ending, or the one who would love that ending, they're never going to get through that front end. They're never even going to pick up your book.
Hmm.
So um, sometimes you, as a writer, you have to be able to take that breath and be willing to make some of those changes so that it's a marketable product.
Okay. And so you're doing work as early as the earliest phases of beta reading with your clients from a marketing approach.
Yep, some of them I am. Yep. Hmm.
Okay.
Hmm.
And so this is pre-agent submission, pre everything like that. So would you say that you're as much sort of a book coach as you are a marketer?
I've even been referred to as a book whisperer, as an author whisperer. And part of it is I play a lot of devil's advocate
Yeah.
with my authors because I want to give them that voice that they it may not necessarily be my voice, but it could be that voice out there, and um, have them look at it from, different points of view.
Hmm.
Um, and I have a very calm way about, and
I'm not afraid of you at all.
yeah.
You seem very calm.
I'm I stay very calm, and writers are very emotional. And I
Yes.
get that because you're artists and you're creators. And so I've been working around creative people my whole career. And I guess my personality fits well because I can just be a little voice of reason. I can, also let them say, "Oh, I'm a vent," and I can like,
Yeah.
so um I do wear many hats, but um so in the beginning, yeah, it's everything from making sure your story is really tight, as tight as you can make it, to
Hmm.
even how you name your book,
Yeah.
your cover design. All those things are really, really important to the marketing standpoint.
Hmm.
Um, and and what's interesting is that these are some of the things that a lot of times writers just kind of blow through, or they kind of have tunnel vision because you have such a distinct idea of what you think this book is going to be and what your vision
Hmm.
is, that sometimes that laser precision, you know, is good because it's pushing you forward, but it's really bad because you're not necessarily, taking a, chance to kind of, see your surroundings and making sure, hey, am I reading the room right?
Yeah.
So,
So, are you working? So, an author, if they were to get a publisher, are you working directly with the author and the publisher to sort of work on the marketing plan?
yeah. So, if I'm working with a traditionally published author, usually where I come in is I try to fill those areas of marketing where the publisher may not necessarily
Okay.
be
Yep.
doing. And as you've probably heard from many authors and maybe from your own experience, and that the publishers are doing less and less on the marketing front.
Yes.
And
Yes.
yes, and looking for authors who, number one, sort of have created their own marketing engine, or
Hmm.
two, willing to take it on, and or we'll bring in some outside help.
Yep.
So yeah, so what I try to do is, because I certainly don't want to have somebody compensate me for something that the publisher is already going to be doing. It doesn't
Hmm.
make sense for us to double up. Now, there's sometimes going to be a little bit of overlay, but usually those areas are kind of the good ones where, hey, it's good if we're both doing a lot of social media, for example. I mean,
Yeah.
that's not going to hurt anything. But, we don't want to necessarily both be submitting, arcs to the same writers, and then now we're wasting our effort in terms of like reviewers or whatnot. Um,
Hmm.
so yeah, so I try to sort of kind of fill in the areas. Like I kind of just draw a little outline outside of
Hmm.
what the publisher will be doing.
So let's talk about the blurb industrial complex, or
Hmm.
the system whereby authors go to other authors, or alternatively go to independent reviewers to get their book reviewed. So
Hmm.
is that sort of a thing that you, as a marketer, would assist with? Do you have just a general strategy? Are those really important? That's another question that I think everyone wonders. And how, or what is the expectation that you've found of the author having to go do that, which I've heard is a big thing, versus the publisher actively going out on the author's behalf?
So so you're referring to the endorsement blurbs from other
Yes, the
authors.
endorsement blurbs.
Yeah.
Yes.
So those, it's okay. Well, first of all, you have to, if you're going to secure blurbs, always remember this is quid pro quo. So yes.
Ah.
So because you're asking writers to take some time to
Hmm.
whether I, I'm not going to name names, but I do know that there are some who, I mean, look, it's really hard to read a 90,000 word manuscript and then, and be a writer and stuff like that. And so I get that. But um, I know most writers will at least do a hard skim
Hmm.
on it. And so it's it's eye candy.
Yeah.
And it's lending credibility to you that
Hmm.
somebody thought enough of your work to lend their name to endorse your work. Uh, I think in terms of securing endorsement blurbs, it's sort of a group effort.
Yeah.
So I have, some writers that I know that, are usually great about doing that. And it helps the writers who give the blurb because it's putting their name and what they've done. It gives their name and claim to fame. So it's certainly a win-win. Um, but so usually sometimes agents will do that.
Oh,
Will
okay.
help with that and they will get some of their other clients agented, God, that's a hard word to say,
Yeah.
clients on their roster to help out with that. Publishers will certainly do that as well. And then I think it's also really important for writers to have their own network of
Hmm.
writers that they can go to. The holy grail, obviously, is if you can get onto the jacket.
Yes.
And so obviously there's only so much real estate. So you need to kind of save that for the best names that you can get. But for the writers that don't, you just make sure you put them on your website, give them a lot of social media shout outs and things like that. So, and just share some love. But I
Hmm.
think that for the most part, the writing community I find to be extremely supportive. So I always think that it's fairly common to be able to get endorsement blurbs.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what in terms of are you finding in your marketing experience are the marketing tactics that have biggest ROI? So what you're getting the most out of for your time, for your effort, and for your money from a marketing standpoint.
So if I could put my finger on that one thing, I would have a lot more free time on my I
I'm
I
sure it's different for different
it
genres,
is
of
it's
course.
yes, yes.
Yes.
And the different tactics that are applied to a campaign, for example,
Yep.
um, they kind of all do different things. So I know that sometimes writers will say, well, if I spend X number of dollars on this service, I should get X number back,
Yeah.
and and I'm just going to be really honest. It doesn't have that sort of perfect exchange rate because when you're doing, depending on the marketing you're doing, okay, so if you're
Yep.
doing strict, and I hate to, I don't mean to dissect marketing too much, but there are a couple different lanes of it. So you've got your
Hmm.
publicity side, which is, we call it earned media, which is you did not have to pay for this appearance. You did not have to pay for this content. So these are your unpaid. So a podcast appearance,
Yes, the Dadlit pod.
the Dadlit Pod
The
is
pod.
excellent earned media. You are earned
Yes.
media.
I feel
Uh,
good about myself knowing that I'm
Yes,
earned
you
media.
are earned media. We had to so for this exposure, we had to earn it with you. It
Yes.
wasn't something that we paid for. So anything like that, bloggers, anything that you get exposure that you do not pay for, but TV, radio interviews, all of that is anything editorial is really earned media.
Yeah, so
So,
it's sort of an exchange. In my case, what I'm getting is content,
mhm,
for example, but more than content, I think building a network of interested people in what we're doing here at the Dadlit Pod. For example, the way to do that is to get authors who are Dadlit authors. At the same time, what they're getting is the exposure of the Dadlit audience, but also what I hope is an opportunity to articulate themselves and to present their book in an organized manner that makes it engaging and sellable.
correct.
Right.
No,
Yeah.
that's great. Yes.
Yes.
And as a podcaster, you're getting also the exposure from your guests sharing your content, and now someone new who has not heard the Dad Led Pod is now
Yes.
getting introduced. So there's like, yeah, it's like this great, you know, symbiotic relationship through earned media. That
Yeah, the hope is right that I get to share the author's book and then the author shares the podcast and we both walk away with a plus one exchange. So it's
exactly.
it's not a matter of one person losing something and another person gaining something. It's actually a productive exchange that spreads both the podcast and the book.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep. So the the general goal of publicity in earned media is I mean you're gaining exposure
Yeah.
and you're getting the name out, you're creating some familiarity. And the old advertising metric that was always used is that people need to be exposed to content it's like something like 3.2 times in order for them to actually act and make a purchase or create a
Hmm.
transaction of some sort. So so all the exposure, certainly is beneficial to the overall goal. Um,
Hmm.
Now anything you pay for, that is advertising.
Yeah.
So, and then that gray area of
Hmm.
the paid review, because they're like, well, you're paying us, but you're getting an honest
Uh,
review. So, so that one,
uh, yeah.
it's, yeah. So I almost think of that as like, it's like advertorial, you know?
Yeah.
So, and I get that they need to have money to support the effort, and plus it's a lot of reading and whatnot. But but of course it certainly it has its place, especially some of the big ones. And so between all of those, whether you're paying for it, whether you're, getting PR, publicity, earned media, if you're getting something a hybrid where you are paying for their time, but they're going to give you an air quote, very honest um, review. And then, of course, all of the book bloggers and then social media, all of those things have their place in
Mhm.
this engine of book
Yes.
marketing. And I don't think any one of them work on their own. One thing might
Hmm.
work and do something at a particular time, but once it's over, it's over. It's not necessarily sustainable. Now,
Yes.
if, I mean, if you get someone like Oprah who's like, I love this book, everyone needs to buy. Okay, that's totally different. So,
I actually got introduced to I have a friend who introduced me to this fact about Oprah's book club, which is that when Oprah introduces a book,
mhm,
and Oprah actually tends to introduce very high-minded literary works that are to a popular audience, that it will, in fact, for a very short time, depress sales of other books because everyone is buying that book.
right,
And however, in the aggregate, by providing people with a way to introduce them to sort of high quality books. Oprah is also serving the book market by bringing awareness and creating sort of a mover and shaker type market for
Hmm.
books. And I
Hmm.
just thought that was really interesting that a person could have that sort of pull or that sort of ability to move a book. And I try to think about because of course as you know, we at the Dad Lit Pod are trying to create a new genre of books, which are books by, for, and about dads. And, I've been trying to figure out who would be the Dad Lit
Ambassador.
ambassador. Who's, which big author, which figure. And so that's an ongoing thing that we're tackling here. By here, I mean with me and all the people that follow at the Dadlit Pod on Twitter.
Oh, that sounds like it would be a great polling question.
Well, yeah, right.
Yeah,
That's
you
this
need
is the
to.
this is why I'm interested in my wife specializes in metrics, in public health metrics. So I'm always interested in metrics. Do you retain metrics as you go? Do you take stock of what seems to be more successful, or are you approaching every project from an individualized strategy based on recognized audience?
Yeah, I don't think that there's necessarily a good metrics to follow as a cookie cutter um,
Hmm.
sort of benchmark
Hmm.
because yeah, this landscape has become just so fragmented
Oh
and
yeah, yeah.
there are so
Highly
many,
personalized.
yeah, that but I will look at how things are performing and um will constantly make adjustments as I go along as needed. I also like to experiment with different copy styles. I'm also a very big fan of having my authors utilize humor whenever
Hmm.
possible. Um, I try, I say, I'm putting an emphasis on the word try to encourage my writers to stay away from politics.
I
And
mean,
uh,
yeah.
and I know, that's why I say I try, and
At the same time, the other side of that is I've seen some authors who have achieved I think of Devin Erickson being the primary one, who achieved a lot of recognition with an audience based on their politics. Does that
well,
make sense?
if the politics, and I actually have some clients where politics was part of the brand.
Yeah,
Now, that's totally different.
yeah,
I'm talking about if an author is just sort of wading into the waters of political discord just for the sake of it.
yeah.
Um, and I, I would never tell people not to have your political opinions. I'm certainly not even saying don't express your political opinions. I just say don't
Yes.
do it in the same breath as your books. Like if you can help it, because or the other thing
So basically the Michael Jordan philosophy of Republicans buy sneakers too.
just I say when and I've gotten the I'm not exaggerating. I've gotten the 2 a.m. text messages from
Yep.
an author who's very upset about something, blah, 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 blah. Or I also have had to do damage control
Mm.
on more than one occasion because one of my authors, or more than one, has sort of engaged and then it created a little bit of a ruckus. You know, and then it was like, oh God, now I gotta go tell Liz and she's gonna be really mad at me. So
Well, this is the other side. There is there is a contingent of the literary world that has been uh, particularly when it comes to male authors. And I think of a lot of people who follow pop culture on YouTube, a lot of prominent pop culture people who have been pushing this idea of returning to the celebrity contentious male writing figure that they feel has kind of disappeared from the industry. In this way, I'm thinking about someone like Salman Rushdie or Christopher Hitchens, or the contentious figure of old. Uh, do you think that given the nature of publishing now and given the nature of social media, that in fact that bad boy or that that figure is probably gone from the zeitgeist, and it's probably not an admirable thing to pursue if you want to sell books today?
It always comes back to what kind of book are you trying to sell?
Ah, okay.
So, and I feel like the world is so upside down at times that, when they say what was trendy then, like all of a sudden comes back around in 20 years or 10 years
Yeah.
or whatever. So I'm not a never say never kind of
Hmm.
person, but I always just say, um, if you're going to do whatever it is you need to do on social media,
Yeah.
and you are a writer and you are using your public facing posts, not your intimate friend. Like, I know some
Yes.
that they keep a private page and they're very selective. It's just like their people that
Yes.
they can rant to about whatever, but using their public facing platform,
Hmm.
I say, if you're feeling an emotion, don't post.
Yeah.
Don't do it if you're angry, hungry, sad,
Lonely. It's basically
tired.
it's the alcoholic's approach to putting down the bottle. Okay, so we had a temporary incident, a brownout in North Carolina. It is hot. I had one on Monday. But so here is an interesting question. You as a marketer, if I wanted to create sort of a nexus of engagement for dads and dad-led authors. So if, for example, what I wanted to do is if an author comes to me and they're like, Dan, I want to be on the podcast. I'm a dad. I write about dads. Where do I go to promote my book, to find dads? What would your advice be? Other than obviously appearing on my podcast, which is always a good thing, being that I'm the premier dad lit podcaster.
That's, that's hard because there isn't, like you said, there isn't
It
just
doesn't
a,
exist. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, there
So
isn't, yeah. So
how if I wanted to build that,
sort of like
what would
you want to
so
build
if
it so they will come.
yeah, yeah. So sort of if I wanted to build, first of all, I've started a podcast. I engage with authors, I engage with industry professionals, and I'm able to get guests, and I have a lot of guests that are very interested. They want to come on the pod, and the reason they want to come on the pod is not just because they want to talk about lit, but because they want to get read.
Mhm.
So I'd like to be able to point them in the direction of other resources and other places where um where they can chum, like being out shark fishing for dads who might like lit. So how would you propose going about and finding where dads are chumming for lit?
Well, well, I guess so. You're kind of asking me two questions. So you're asking one, like, how do you sort of create this
Yeah, yeah,
environment? But then you're asking, like, but where do I also go to find it?
yeah.
So, so I'm kind of a fan of doing things that are multimedia, and I think
Mhm.
having the podcast is a really great part of it. But I think you need
Yes.
to sort of marry that with a web environment where maybe
Hmm.
you can create something where you're now creating like a dad beehive, if you will.
Hmm. Like the
And
K hive. Yep.
like the what hive?
Like the K hive.
The K hive. What's the K hive?
The Kamala's
Oh
Kamala
God.
K hive.
See, this is how much I stay away from politics. And I'm like, what? I don't even
Yes.
know. I just I don't want to hear
Yeah.
it if it's fun. So uh, I think that you could create something of a dad lit hub, if you will, um, because I'm sure that there are things that are out there. And then you probably could, then you would optimize your content so that people would find you.
Hmm.
Make sure that you sort of brand yourself as like the dad live lit you know
Center.
center, yes, forum,
Yes.
foundation, core, whatever, yeah. And sometimes, like, if you start to find some other compatible partners, so maybe there are some bloggers out there,
Hmm.
and then maybe or you create your own content because there are so many people who are looking for a place to have their content housed. So I don't think usually there's no shortage of people who would create content for you.
Hmm.
Um, you get guest posts. You could have all of your guest writers create content for this hub, if you will. So there are, I mean, so it's kind of like two things. Like one, you need to sort of like go cast a net and try to find some people that do it, and a lot of it is just sort of like doing some searches on your own, and but the other part is like if something like this doesn't exist, I say build it, make it,
Yeah.
because everyone's got it, someone has to be first to market.
Hmm.
Why not you?
Yes. So here's my other thing that I'm interested in talking to you about. I am very intrigued by the idea of, can you hear me? By the idea of creating a platform for micro investments in individual books, right? The idea being, well, you've heard of Kickstarter, right?
Yes.
Kickstarter is both a way to raise money, but it's also a marketing tool
Yes.
for marketing new products. In this case, what I envision is a website, I would say similar to Goodreads or something of that nature, but where an individual could survey projects. So, say an editor and an author come together and they advertise a completed manuscript and they would like to bring that completed manuscript to market. But of course, that requires a bunch of things. It requires marketing. It requires getting a cover design. It requires all of the other professional elements associated with creating a book, which cost money and are usually provided by a traditional publisher.
Hmm.
However, in this case, what I would say is create a platform whereby individuals could look at that project, could look at the author, could look at the editor, and could look at the pre written promotional material or synopsis for the book, and then pay $25 to have shares in that book's later sale to the, I would say, probably to the max of a 2x return on investment. So basically, if the book sells 10,000 copies based on the budget, an individual will get up to, a certain dollar amount on their investment. And at the very least, by paying the $25, they get a copy of the book when it's done. Now, I think that this would be a great way to first of all fund indie books, but also to create the sort of exponential marketing engagement. The idea that not only is a project hot, but you can invest in the project. And what would have to happen is that the website itself would then become the sort of de facto publisher. They would be the one that distributes it to Amazon, that distributes it to Barnes and Noble, and that sells it digitally online. And they're the ones handling the financial, you know, element of it for a certain percentage of the book sales. Now, what is wrong with it, and how do we make it happen?
It's interesting because I had a crowdsourcing conversation not so long ago. So,
hmm
um, so I mean, it's not a new idea in terms of at least crowdsourcing
Yeah,
projects like this.
crowdsourcing. Yeah,
Yeah, and that's kind of what this would be.
yeah.
The biggest challenge with something like that, and
hmm
I think anyone who has self-published has probably experienced this, is that the standard price that a traditional publisher is able to bring a book to market for
Yeah.
is at such a lower production cost than it is for an independent to release their book with a much more narrow market margin.
hmm
So when you say $25 for a share for a book, that probably is not going to be enough, unfortunately. So you really,
Really?
yeah, yeah. So
So in order to bring an independent book to market, so we're
you,
saying probably $3,500 once you have an editor, because the editor is part of the book, and is usually what I would argue is the most expensive part. You think that a share is probably going to need to be in excess of $25,
I think so.
even
Or
for a micro share.
yeah, yeah. That's because the when you're sourcing the funds to bring a book to market, and when you talk about the charges for the editor, whatever, you have to remember, we haven't even paid the writer yet. The writer
Yeah.
hasn't made anything. And so the production cost alone to get the
hmm
formatting, the really professional cover design, then you have to decide, like, well, what formats are you going to produce this in? And is that $25 price point going to cover just like trade paperback quality, or is it going to be, hardcover, or what? So that's always the question when you're doing a crowdsource, is you need to get some investors that are going to be above that book face value retail price.
hmm
You'll need to have some investors that'll come in that they're like, no, I believe in this more, and I'll put in, I know it sounds like 500, but I'm gonna, you know, get some sort of, cool acknowledgement, or, you know, um, in the book somehow. Um,
hmm
some sort of vanity aspect to it. Because it is very hard to, because then you have to figure out, well, exactly how much do I have to raise just to bring it to market? And then how many copies do I have to sell, because you've already pre-sold some of your core copies to fund
hmm
it. to some of the people that are already your biggest supporters because you will have been promoting it on your social media. So now you got to, in order to make money, like go completely out of your follower base and go further on. And then there's money for that.
Yeah.
There's marketing
So
expenses. So
so how much do you think it truly takes to successfully produce and market an individual work?
that's really hard. That's very hard.
Well,
Uh,
you've gotta have some experience with the projected cost.
yeah,
So
I we've
what would you say is an average
of what. So are you asking me with the production costs or just the marketing costs?
marketing costs?
Just the marketing. So finished product, just the
Yep.
marketing. I would say that most will invest to do a serious push on it is
Hmm.
usually somewhere between 5 and 10,000.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Hmm. Now I know that not everyone has that budget,
Yes, yes.
but so I work with independent writers,
Hmm.
and most writers, you're independent. You have day jobs, and you sort of have to look at your marketing as an investment in your business, as an investment in
Hmm.
your product. I mean, just like any company out there, they have a marketing budget, and
Yes.
your publishing career has to really fall in line with just how any other business would run. I mean, when you
Hmm.
think about any business out there, who doesn't market? They all do.
Hmm. Well,
So,
that's the thing about small business owners is that if you're waiting for a client to show up, you're already in trouble.
yes.
You need to be hunting clients
Yeah.
at all times.
Yeah. Do you ever watch Shark Tank? Have you ever seen Shark Tank?
Yes, yes, I've
Okay,
seen Shark Tank. I
yeah,
actually prefer the West Texas Investor Club. Is the funnier version of Shark
oh,
Tank.
okay. I have to check that out. But
Yes, with
but you
Matthew McConaughey's brother.
Oh, okay. Oh yeah, you have to send me that. You have to send me the link or something. So, but yeah, but one of the things that's always interesting about Shark Tank, and I have the news on a lot, and then at certain hour, like CNBC or whichever
Hmm.
one has it, like we'll start to play Shark Tank, and it's really good work background sounds, the chatter, and you hear, it's like I'm flooding my brain with marketing messages all the time. and, and but one thing I really like is that when they're talking about their marketing budgets for these all these different types of businesses, like they'll say, well, you have to be investing in your business. Like there is a cost for acquisition.
Yeah.
You can't just wait for things to just show up. I mean, yeah, you'll have some that will just be somehow a social media phenomenon, or I did a big PR push, and then but now it's over and now you don't have any more customers. Like it's something that you constantly have to be doing. And so as a writer, whether you're doing it like a paid marketing or you're doing your own marketing, marketing has to be an integral part of your writing engine. It has to be a core component. So,
Yeah, that's it. It certainly sounds like it.
yeah.
So what you're suggesting is because recently, for example, someone did a survey of books people like to read and books people don't like to read. And I don't know if you saw it.
I
It was on LitHub. It was very interesting. And what it discovered is that people like to read books with female protagonists where someone gets murdered and that don't have sports and specifically don't have fishing at the center,
so
which I thought was interesting, and
so
that's what people like to read. So the other side of that is how do you break with the algorithm? Um, how would you go about, marketing something that was, for example, different than what that is telling you is the thing that everyone wants.
Uh, well, I don't think that writers should necessarily try to write for what people from a survey say they
Hmm.
want to read. Don't try to fit your square peg into the round hole. And I know that that actually sounded worse than it, especially, but rather than trying to fit the find the fit.
Yeah.
Um, and so as a writer and you're now creating something, bring it to the world, as someone who writes in my own spare time, when a writer finishes a manuscript, I always say, listen, you should really be giving yourself a really firm pat on your back because that is a huge, huge
This is
accomplishment.
true. This is
Because
true.
yeah, because I meet so many people who say, especially like when you're chit-chatting, you're like, oh, what do you do? Whatever. I've discovered like every Uber and Lyft driver is a writer. And it's kind of it's really fascinating. And everyone's like, "Oh, I'm a writer. Oh, I write." And I was like, "Oh, well, what's your book?" "Oh, well, it hasn't been. I have this idea." I said, "Well, it's not really. You're not really a writer yet." Yeah. So I think there's
And you at least need to put a title page
yes, you need
together.
something. You need something.
Yeah.
Um, so I think that after you've birthed something that
Hmm.
is so tremendous, um, I think you need to make sure that you're finding the right audience for your creation. But in finding that right audience, you have to really be honest of what your concept is. Um, you have to be able to describe what you've created in an elevator pitch.
Hmm.
I think that's something that a lot of writers have difficulty with. Um, and if you can't tell me what your book is about in basically one, could be a little run on, but one solid sentence, then you've gone on too long or you don't really know.
Hmm.
If you're telling me synopsis and you're going on and on, I'm like, no, 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 you've already lost me.
Hmm.
And that's a hard skill, but it's something that writers should really focus on. And when you decide to now take this creation and you are going to bring it to your audience, make sure that you're giving this to people who are going to want to read your book or as close to as possible. I think sometimes what bothers me about some of these, and as we were talking about these bot
Yeah.
marketing services, is that they cast really wide nets, which
Hmm.
is good because yes, it's sometimes a numbers game and you want to, you throw out a bigger net, you're going to get more fish. But do you want to reach, more of the wrong people or fewer of the right people? I, s- I I have had instances with writers where there was a wide net that was cast, and then the early reviews were not the right bloggers for
Hmm.
their genre. And then the reviews were reflective of that. And so you're already starting with like a lower rating, and now you've got to like let it catch up, as
Yeah.
opposed to kind of like focusing on like who are the people that are really going to hone in on this category, this genre, this type of book, and let them be the ones to champion your story first. Um, and then the numbers will level off to whatever they're going to be, as your book reaches more and more people. But
Hmm.
I always just try to say like, approach it a little more with a scalpel than you would an axe, um, unless you've created something that is just so mass market. Then
Hmm.
sure, but I think that most writers right now are not necessarily in that group.
Yeah. I mean, I don't even think Colleen Hoover is what I would call universally uh, accessible or desirable.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
that's
Yes.
yeah, and I think that's what this business has become is that there is, it's become Baskin Robbins. Like there is how many flavors now? I mean, it's not, you don't
Hmm.
just have vanilla, chocolate, and strawberry. There are just so many subgenres. And as we were, I like when they start making up these or coming up with these new genre names, and I'm like,
Dad lit.
what? Dad
Yeah.
lit, what was the other one? Romantasy, and that I'm like, what? Sex with aliens? I don't understand, or sex with a fairy? I don't know.
Yes, that's exactly what it is. I think someone was referring to it as monster banging.
A monster bang. Is it the Invisible Man fantasy? I don't know. Maybe.
I don't think, does anyone have an invisible man
They
fantasy?
always had that joke that women had the Invisible Man fantasy. I said, "Whoa!" I said, "Okay, well, hey, I'm just the marketing person. I don't come up with the ideas. I just pitch them." So,
Yeah. Invisible man fantasy. That's an interesting one. I haven't even seen that. By the way, we could pitch that right now. I
you
guarantee you. We could
someone
get
write
a
someone
random,
write it down now. Start
yeah,
writing that manuscript.
someone at Random House is going to listen to this one day and go, "Oh man, they got that great idea for that Invisible Man romantasy. People love that. It's definitely happening."
Oh, yeah, all I can say is you're welcome. So,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Go out there and do it.
Yeah.
Be the person that writes the Invisible Man romantasy novel.
What, someone has to be first, and
Yeah,
that's,
exactly.
but that's, yeah, I just, I think that's the other thing that I really enjoy about this business, this gig, is that, I mean, I mean, you just never know which way it's going to go. And I've
Yeah, yeah.
I've had the true honor of working with so many different types of writers.
Hmm.
I work with a lot of thriller writers, but I'm not exclusively thriller. Um,
Yeah. Well, I mean, there
so
are a lot of thriller books
that's the
that
other,
get sold.
just like,
So
yeah.
yeah.
So yeah, but it's yeah, the just the whole conversation of marketing in general, it's such a huge, like, just brain dump of so many things to think about and things to even talk
Hmm.
about. And so I know we're just kind of scratching the surface of, some of this, but
Yeah. Well, I'll go with if you want to learn more, you can go to Lis Malone's website at lismalone.com. And she does marketing and knows about it, which we authors often struggle with. So, Liz, is there anything else you'd like to leave us with before we sign off?
I would, just say that, more than anything, for anyone out there uh who's thinking about marketing or working on marketing and whatnot, uh definitely turn to your fellow writing community,
Hmm.
because there are some very talented self-marketers out there. So,
Yes.
and as much as I don't want, I don't want to be put out of business, there are
Yes.
so many things that writers, you guys, can do on your own, that you don't
Hmm.
have to bring someone like me on. But I sort of like, teach a man to fish, and then,
Yeah.
so just that idea that you have to hire somebody, it's not true.
Yeah.
But we all, have day jobs and things like that, and sometimes you don't have the time to. But yeah, but one of the other things that I do, Dan, is that I do consulting work, where sometimes I'm just acting as the coach, and I do, coaching sessions to kind of help someone get on track, because they can't necessarily hire a marketer to do some of these things, but they just kind of want to have their things evaluated. So, but I definitely encourage writers to, you know, be their own marketer, be their own champion, because there really isn't going to be anyone that should be able to pitch your work better than you. you should know
Yeah.
it inside and out. So
Well, Liz, thank you so much for coming on, and congratulations, the first woman to appear on the Dadlit pod.
I'm very, very honored.
Congratulations, setting the standard.
Well, I'm a fan. I'm a big dad fan. I have a lot of dads that I had my dad. I had dad authors, and so
Yes.
I think you're onto something, Dan. So
I will thank you. And you feel free to send anyone for what are we called? The
earned media.
earned media. That's right, folks. The Dadlit pod has earned media potential. This has been Dan Roberts and the Dadlit pod. Thank you all for tuning in.
Our time together has come to an end. It's time to return to your wife, kids, and friends. It's time to pick up those books you forgot while you wait for the next Dadlit pod.